Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am Joey Francis, your life, love, and relationship coach. Thank you so much for joining me. My hot take: your wants are irrelevant. It's your needs that you need to focus on. Now, I know that sounds a little harsh, and I know some of you probably had a reaction the second I said it. Good. Sit with it for a second, because I think this may be one of the most important things I can say to you when it comes to dating, relationships, and choosing a person you're actually going to build a life with. And before anybody twists what I'm saying into something I'm not saying, let me clear this up right away. I am not telling you to date someone you're not attracted to. I am not telling you to ignore chemistry, ignore vibe, ignore energy, and go pick the most practical human being you can find, like you're hiring an accountant. A relationship still needs to feel alive. You still need to be attracted to them. You need to enjoy being around them. You need to like talking to them, touching them, spending time with them. If none of that is there, what are we even doing? So yes, attraction matters. Chemistry matters. Vibe matters. Those things can absolutely belong on your list of needs. The problem starts when people turn them into the whole list, because that is where everything begins to break down. A relationship needs life, and it needs structure. Attraction, chemistry, and vibe are what make the whole thing feel alive. They get your attention. They make you care. They make you want to be there in the first place. Then the deeper questions show up. Can this person meet your needs? Can this person build something real with you? Can this person give you peace, respect, honesty, consistency, and the kind of treatment that makes a relationship sustainable? That is the conversation. And that is one of the biggest ideas inside the Blueprint Method. The whole book, or the whole point of the book, was to never help you build some polished fantasy list that sounds good in your head and looks impressive on paper. The whole point is to force clarity. It is to get you honest enough with yourself that you stop dating from old programming, from attraction alone, from chemistry alone, from fantasy, from ego, from loneliness, from whatever nonsense is floating around in your head, and start dating with intention. Dating with intention. That is what the blueprint is for. It's there to protect your time and your future. Because if you really think about it, most people are not choosing from clarity. They think they are, but they're not. They're choosing from a mixture of attraction, projection, preferences, old wounds, old habits, and whatever they picked up from family, friends, movies, social media, and the rest of the world. Then they wonder why they keep ending up in the same place. And a big reason is because they have no idea how to tell the difference between a want and a need. That distinction changes everything. A want usually lives on the surface. It catches your eye. It lights you up. It sounds good when you're daydreaming. It is often symbolic. It is often vague. It is often tied to how you imagine a relationship should look instead of how it would actually feel over time. A need, completely different. A need has consequences. A need is something that, if it's missing, your life with that person becomes harder, uglier, less peaceful, less safe, and less sustainable. That is why a need is not up for negotiation. It is a boundary. It is a non-negotiable. It is a deal breaker. It is something that has to be there, or you do not keep moving forward just because you like the person or because other things look good on the surface. That is the whole point of a need. It protects you and your future by telling you where you do not bend. And once you really understand that, you start to see why wants are irrelevant. Wants may get your attention, but they do not protect your life. They do not tell you whether a relationship is actually workable. They do not tell you whether the person in front of you can meet you where it matters. They just make noise. And when you give that noise too much authority, this is when you start making very expensive mistakes. Let's talk about that. For instance, a lot of women say they want someone tall. Okay, fine. But what does that mean? And I'm serious. What does that actually mean? Because saying you want someone tall sounds clear, but it really isn't. Maybe what you mean is you want someone taller than you. Maybe you want to feel physically safe. Maybe you want to feel feminine next to him. Maybe you like the look of it. Maybe you like the feeling of being next to a man who carries himself in a way that makes you feel protected. Those are very different things. And yet, people will throw out one vague word like that should settle the whole matter. Frankly, it doesn't. If a woman says, I want a man who's 6'2", that's one kind of statement. But if she says, I want to feel physically safe and feminine next to the man, now we're getting somewhere. Now the language is more honest. Now the want is starting to reveal the need underneath it. And see, that matters because if the actual need is safety, steadiness, and a certain physical dynamic, there may be more than one way that can be met. But if the person stays locked onto the symbol, they may pass up on somebody who could give them exactly what they require simply because he didn't fit the fantasy version in their head. And people do this all the time. Same thing with money. Somebody says, okay, I want someone wealthy. Well, same question. What does wealthy mean? Are we talking about a billionaire? Are we talking about someone who lives comfortably? Are we talking about somebody who is disciplined, self-sufficient, stable, and capable of providing a decent life for themselves? Are we talking about someone who isn't going to become a financial burden? See, those are very different conversations. And I think people need to be a lot more honest here because if what you really want is a bank account, then say that. Own it. But do not confuse a provider fantasy with a life partner. Those are not the same thing. Don't get me wrong, money matters, stability matters. A person's ability to take care of themselves matter. Their relationship to responsibility matters. Their ambition matters. But wanting somebody to carry out your finance or to carry you financially because that makes you feel very secure is a very different thing from choosing a person based on love, respect, and the fact that you want to spend your life with them. That is the danger of staying vague. The vaguer you are, the easier it is to chase a symbol and miss the real thing. I've seen this happen even with education. A lot of people say they want somebody highly educated. Again, fine. But what does that mean to you? Do you need a degree or do you need intelligence, curiosity, depth, and the kind of conversation that keeps you engaged? Because if it's the second one, then the degree is just one possible expression of the need. It is not the need itself. And that's what I want you to understand. A lot of wants are rough, surface level ways of describing deeper needs. They are lazy language, and they are the symbol instead of the substance. And if you never force yourself to go deeper, you will organize your life or your love life around the wrong things. That is what the blueprint method was meant to stop. The blueprint forces you to go deeper. It forces you to stop staying vague and saying vague things that sound good and start getting brutally clear with yourself. What am I actually asking for? What do I really mean? What is underneath all of this? What am I truly unwilling to live without? What is merely attractive to me and what is actually necessary for me? That is the work. And if you don't do that work, you stay shallow even when you think you're being deep. Someone says they want status. Okay. What does that even mean? That is one of those words that people love to throw around because it sounds impressive. But when you really push on it, most people do not even know what they mean by it. Maybe they means they're respected. Maybe they mean socially confident. Maybe they mean somebody with friends, somebody established, ambitious, polished, somebody who has built a life. Those are all different things. And yet people use one big vague word and act like that should help them choose. It doesn't. If you can't define what you mean, then the word is not helping you. That's what I mean when I say wants are irrelevant. It's not that they're bad. It's that they're often too vague to be useful until you translate them into something real. And that is where this whole episode gets practical. Because once you understand that your wants are often just the surface language of deeper needs, now you can actually do something with them. You can translate, you can refine, you can strip away the clutter. And that clutter matters more than people realize. A cluttered list leads, believe it or not, to cluttered choices. The more noise you have in your head, the easier it is for the wrong person to look right, even just for a little while. They look good on paper. They hit the image. They trigger the fantasy. They fit the aesthetic. They give you that feeling that you found what you've been looking for. And then a few months later, you're sitting there with someone who has the look, the vibe, the style, the presence, the money, the degree, the whatever. And yet you still feel like something is missing. Seen it a million times. That's why I'm making this episode. That is what happens when people choose from wants. They choose the wrapping paper and then act surprised by what's inside the box. Needs to stop that from happening. Needs slow you down. Needs force a different kind of honesty. Because when you're talking about needs, you're talking about things that affect the actual relationship. You're talking about honesty, respect, consistency, emotional steadiness, accountability, communication, shared values, how the person treats you, how they handle tension. Can they repair? Whether they can grow, whether they are stable enough to build a life with you. And I get it. Those are not sexy or glamorous things to say on a date. They are not as exciting as chemistry and vibe, but they are the things that decide whether a relationship has any real chance of surviving. That is why your needs protect your future. And this is why the key question inside the blueprint matters so much. If the person had everything else, but did not have this one thing, would I actually walk away? That's the filter. That's the test. That's the cleanest way I know to separate a want from a need. Because people love to say they need things that they would absolutely compromise on the second someone exciting shows up. That tells you it was never a need. It was just a preference. It was nice to have, pretending to be essential. And if you don't catch that, you start building a life around things that were never meant to hold that much weight. And see, that's dangerous, because the more authority you give your wants, the easier it becomes to betray your needs. The second somebody shows up in a package you've always been drawn to, that is how people talk themselves into a bad decision. The chemistry is loud, the image is strong, the fantasy is easy. And before they know it, they're excusing things they would have sworn mattered to them. That is how people end up in relationships with enough chemistry to keep going and not enough substance to feel safe. And honestly, I've seen it over and over again. Someone meets a person who looks the part, talks the part, dresses the part, has the lifestyle, has the charm, has the money, has the whatever. And because the want is so loud, they stop paying attention to the quieter things. They stop noticing the inconsistency. They stop noticing the lack of depth. They stop noticing the disrespect. They stop noticing how uneasy they feel, how much they're excusing, how often they're telling themselves some version of, maybe it'll change. Maybe they'll change. And that's the cost of getting the categories wrong. The want makes noise. The need makes truth. And if you are not careful, noise will win every time, right up until it blows up in a horrific ball of flames. And then you swear off dating and you promise yourself you're never going to do this again until you eventually do it again. Now, another part of this conversation matters because the second people hear me say that wants are relevant, they usually push back with something like, okay. But attraction still matters. Style still matters. Chemistry still matters. And yes, I've said it 1,000,000 times. Of course they do. You need to be attracted to somebody. You need to have chemistry with somebody. You need to vibe with somebody. Without that, what's the point? What are we even doing? A relationship still has to feel alive. You still have to want to be around them, talk to them, touch them, spend time with them. So let me be crystal clear. Those things can absolutely belong on your list of needs. The mistake people make is turning them into the whole list. They matter, but they are not enough on their own to build a healthy relationship. They may get you in the door. They may make the connection feel exciting, but they do not tell you whether the person in front of you is honest, emotionally available, respectful, consistent, or actually safe to build a life with. That is the real point. A relationship needs life and it needs structure. Attraction, chemistry, and vibe are what make it feel alive. Character, values, consistency, emotional stability, and the ability to build are what going to give the whole thing structure. And if one of those is missing, sooner or later, you will feel it. You either end up with something that looks right on paper and feels dead in real life, or something that feels incredible in the beginning, but slowly becomes impossible to trust. You would think that after enough bad relationships, enough confusion, enough chemistry with no peace, people would start choosing differently. They would learn from their mistakes. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for me, a lot of them don't. They keep chasing what impresses them, what excites them, what feels familiar. And then in the end, they end up right back in the same pain with a different face. And that is exactly why I wrote the Blueprint Method. That is exactly why I do this podcast for you. Because a lot of people do not arrive at better choices on their own. They have to be shown a different way to think. They have to be shown how to ask better questions. They have to be shown how to stop worshiping the wrong things. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Because, funny enough, we don't know something until we do, until we learn. And sometimes we've been in the same place, doing the same thing over and over again, that it's almost impossible to evolve unless some outside source shows us otherwise. And I think that is where the blueprint really shines because it gives all of that wisdom structure. It takes the heartbreak, confusion, chemistry, fantasy, and hard earned awareness and says, okay, now let's turn that into something clear enough that you can actually choose differently next time. That is why I love this topic so much, because it's not just about wants versus needs. It's about how people keep sabotaging themselves by putting the wrong things at the center. It's about how many people are one good-looking resume away from forgetting what their real needs even are. It's about how easy it is to call something a need simply because you want it bad enough. It's about how many people are still organizing their future around fantasy and wondering why the relationship keeps collapsing under the weight of reality. And that's why I am so direct. Your wants are irrelevant. Your needs are the things that matter first. They are what tell you whether this person is even worth getting to know further. They are what protect you from building interest around somebody who looks good on the surface, but cannot give you what actually matters. And one of the biggest advantages of modern dating, especially online dating, is that you often get the chance to figure that out before attraction and chemistry have enough power to cloud your judgment. Then, once somebody genuine gives you what you need, a whole lot of what you thought you wanted starts to get very quiet. And here's the thing, that's not settling. That is what clarity feels like. That is what's happening when you finally stop dating from fantasy and start dating from what your life actually requires. Because once your real needs are being met, the little things you used to obsess over stop carrying the same weight. They stop feeling like deal breakers. They stop feeling like the center. And that is how you know you are finally choosing from something deeper than want. And this is one of the biggest things people miss. Once you know what you truly need, your wants stop being so rigid. They stop acting like laws. They become negotiable. Not because you are lowering yourself and not because you are settling, because you finally understand what actually matters. Let's go back to one of the examples I gave you. We're going to talk about the height thing again. A woman might have it in her head that she wants a man who's 6'2". Fine. As I said it a million times, every single person is entitled to want whatever they want. They're not entitled to get it, but they're entitled to want it. Fine. But if she slows down and gets honest, maybe what she needs is to feel protected, feminine, and physically small next to the man she's with. See, and those are not necessarily the same thing unless she's like 6 feet tall. A man does not have to be 6'2" to give her that feeling on average, because the majority of women are short. I think in Canada where I live, it's 5'3". Nonetheless, he may only need to be a little taller than her, even if she's in her highest heels, for that same dynamic to exist. And once she understands that, all of a sudden, she has more options, more variety, more men she can actually meet, talk to, and date without sacrificing the real need underneath the want. And this is what I mean when I say your wants are irrelevant, because once your actual needs are being met, your wants stop being rigid. And they start to become things that you can bend on without betraying yourself. That is one of the biggest advantages of getting clear. Clarity gives you flexibility. Confusion is what makes you rigid. When you don't know what you truly need, you cling to the image, you cling to the symbol, you cling to the fantasy. Once you know what the deeper need actually is, you stop worshiping the package and start paying attention to whether the person in front of you can genuinely meet you where it counts. That is where dating gets better. Because now you're no longer screening people through some narrow fantasy version of what you thought the answer had to look like. Now you're screening them through reality. Can this person actually give me what I need? Can this person actually make me feel the way I'm trying to feel? Can this person actually build the kind of life I'm trying to build? And if the answer is yes, then a whole lot of what you thought you wanted starts to matter a lot less. This is what I want people. This is what I want for people. I want them choosing clearly. I want them building from truth instead of noise. I want them understanding the difference between what pulls them in and what actually holds them safely once they're there. That is what the Blueprint Method is really about. It is not about creating a fantasy person. It is about protecting your life from your own confusion. Thank you so much for listening. I honestly appreciate you guys more than you ever know. And I will say that every single time because it's so true. The feedback that I get honestly brings such joy and makes me want to continue this. If by any chance you want to get in touch with me, ask me a question, send me a story, or tell me your thoughts on this episode, you can go to joeyfrancis.com. That's JoeyFrances.com. And there you can send me a message. You can also find my books, including, which I have to put up on the website, but it should be there by the time this is released. The Blueprint Method, The Logic of Me, A Guided Journal for Self-Discovery, and Fate is Bullshit, A Logical Guide to Happiness. Thank you again so very, very much for listening and supporting. And I honestly hope that this does something for your life and at the very least is entertaining for you. And remember this: the person you want can ruin your life. The person you need can help you build one. Till next time.